June 29th, 2009. I am Andrea Mott. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Dickinson, North Dakota. Can you please state your full name, including maiden name?
Bergstedt.
Can you state your whole name?
Dorthea Anna Bergstedt.
And what is your married name?
Ziegler.
And Dorothy, when and where were you born?
Jordan, Montana.
And what year?
1919.
And have you ever heard an interesting story about your birth?
Well, I have a story shortly after that.
You want to tell us?
Well, that was in September. And Jordan, Montana area is a very desolate country. No trees. And my father had parishes out there, and they lived out in the country from Jordan about 7 miles. Well, here, first part of October, they get a blizzard. Lots of snow and cold, and no coal. So my parents, I was the firstborn child, and they wore their overshoes, coats, just to keep warm in the house. Well, the only thing they had to burn to make a little warmth was sagebrush, which grew wild. So my mother went out and picked up sagebrush and put it in the stove and lit a match to it. It just warmed the oven enough so she could lay me in it. Laid me on a pillow, of course.
In the oven? On the oven?
In the oven. But the door open, you know. I don't know if you remember the stoves they had then. So that's the way they kept me warm. I was about a month old.
Did that happen all winter? That she put you on the oven?
Huh.
Did she put you there a lot during that winter? Did she put you on the oven a lot that winter? You know?
In the oven?
Did she put you there a lot?
Well, I don't remember them saying how long that was, but at least that I know that that's what she did to keep me warm. I don't know how soon they got coal. They had to haul the coal in from Miles City.
How far?
I think it was close to 90, 100 miles.
And Dorothy, can you share some of your earliest memories with us?
Well, I don't remember much from Montana, because then my parents moved to Ashley, North Dakota, when I was about 2 years old.
And what is the earliest thing you can remember?
Well, it would have to be at Ashley. Visiting members, you know.
In the church?
Yeah, from the churches, you know.
Was that with your entire family that you would visit members of the church?
Mm-hmm.
How often?
Well, my father made it a practice to visit every member at least once a year in their home. And of course, if they were sick or something, he'd go more often.
And what was your father's profession?
Pastor,
Of what church?
the Lutheran, American Lutheran.
And let's talk for a minute about your family, about your parents. We'll start with them. What was your father like?
What he was like? Well, I feel he was a compassionate man, very very kind to people and always seeing out for their welfare.
And what was his name?
Dietrich.
And where was your father born?
In Hanover, Germany.
And when did he come to the United States?
I think it was in 1907 or 8.
And how did your father express emotions like love or anger? Do you know how he expressed himself with his emotions? As far as, if he loved someone, what he would do then, or if he was upset with someone, what was he like with his emotions?
Oh. I know he never spanked me, but I could tell by his face, or, it meant you better be good.
And can you describe your relationship with him?
Well, I feel it was very close.
How so? How so? Can you describe how you got along with your father?
Well, very well.
And how did your father cope during the difficult times? During the hard times, how did your father cope then?
Cope with the hard times? Well, I guess they just had to do what they could,
And can you tell us when, where, and how your father died?
They what?
When, where, and how he died? Your father. Can you tell us when, where, and how he died?
How he died?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he had congestive heart failure.
What year?
That was in I've got it all written down. So,
well, let's talk a minute about your mother. Can you tell us about her?
well, she was American born, but her parents came from Germany too.
From where in Germany?
I just read it the other day. Do you want me to get the papers?
Well, can you tell us where and when she was born?
Well, she was born in Kansas. And June 4th must have been 1897.
And how did she express her emotions? How did your mother express her emotions?
Well, she was strict.
Was she the stricter of the two?
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe how she would discipline you?
Well, she usually wouldn't let me do things when my father would allow me to do certain things.
And can you describe your relationship with her?
Well, we were always taught to respect our elders from my childhood on, no matter what.
And what was your mother's profession?
Well, she came from a farming family until she married my father, you know.
And can you tell us when, where, and how your mother died?
Well, they lived at Halliday, North Dakota at that time. And she had fallen and broke her hip. And she did very well for a week, and then she got an embolism and died real suddenly.
In what year?
That was in 1997.
And how many children did your parents have?
Well, I had 3 brothers.
And who influenced your life more, your mother or your father?
Well, I couldn't say that I favored anyone.
Do you know how your parents met? Do you know how your parents met?
Yeah, my father came out of the seminary, and his first parish was in Rushville, Nebraska, and that's where my mother's folks lived. And that's where he met her.
And how long were they married?
Mm. 60. Was over 60 years.
And can you describe their marriage?
Mm-hmm. Well, they were close. They worked together.
And how did your mother help your father?
Well, we lived in the country all those years, and we always had 2, 3 cows to milk, and chickens and geese, and my mother usually did the milking. You know.
And what other kinds of things did she do with the animals?
Well, she always went with them to visit the members when they were sick, and she would go and help the family if they needed help, or if there was no organist at the service of the church, she'd play the organ.
And what kinds of things did your parents do for pastimes?
Was usually read stories and have a few games with us children.
And what kind of games?
Well, I know it was a card game with numbers. I don't know what I think it was called Flinch.
Do you remember how to play that game?
Somewhat, but I guess you can still like play it. It's still in there.
And well, is there anything else you would like to add about your parents?
Well, I know they worked together. Whatever one or the other had to do, they'd help each other.
And did your father ever talk about growing up in Germany?
Well, all I can remember, he mentioned his father died when he was not quite a year old. So his mother had to raise, he had a brother. His mother had to raise those two boys. And of course, Germany was always involved in wars, so it was a hard life for her.
Did she come to the United States?
No.
Did your father come to the United States with his brother or by himself?
No, his brother never came over either.
And how old then was he when he came to the United States?
Oh, he must have been 19 or 20, maybe even 23 or 24.
And did he train to be a minister while in Germany?
Part-time.
And did he go to school again?
Yeah, he came over here and had 3 more years of seminary in Dubuque, Iowa. He wanted to be a missionary, but he had lost his hearing on his right ear due to scarlet fever, and they wouldn't let him become a missionary. He wanted to go to Africa.
Did he talk about that experience with you? Can you tell us about it?
Well, not much, you know.
And I'd like to talk for a minute about your brothers, you and your brothers. Can you tell me the order you were born in?
Well, Martin was 2 years after me, and he was born in Montana too. But he was just a couple months old when we moved to Ashley.
And then your next brother?
Well, I had another brother then, but he passed away. He was 2 years old.
And then your next?
And then my youngest brother is 9 years younger than I am.
And what is his name?
Herman.
And can you tell me about Martin?
Well, Martin was inclined to be farming. He loved farming. So my dad always, even at Ashley, he wanted to take a retirement or a time off for a couple of years, so he bought a farm so Martin could be farming. And then from that time he went back into the ministry, and he got a call to Halliday and Dunn Center parishes, Dodge.
And what did he do then? What did he do then?
My dad?
Your brother.
Oh, he went into trucking for a little while, and then he owned a service station in Halliday, and of course that was all mechanical work, you know.
And can you tell us about your brother Herman?
Well, he went on to get a higher education. He went to high school in Halliday and then went to college in NDSU into, I don't think it was engineering.
And do you have any interesting stories about when they were born?
Of course, I don't remember nothing about Martin, but Herman, I can remember I came home from school and I heard a baby crying.
Did you know your mom was going to have a baby?
No.
What did you think?
I guess I was just so surprised, you know. You got a brother.
And growing up, how well did you children get along? Growing up, how well did you get along with your brothers?
Oh, we got along pretty well.
And what kind of things would you do together?
Well, at that time, there wasn't much of any. We didn't have TV, we didn't have radio, you know. So we usually would play outside, and we'd make our own little homes along the haystacks, you know. We'd play house.
And since you lived out in the country, what other kinds of activities did you and your brothers do together?
Well, it was through the school years, you know, but it was the usual routine, you know. We didn't go to any movies. We didn't have that either. We just had to play with each other.
And when you were going to school, what kinds of things did you do there?
Well, we'd usually play those common games. I don't know if they're still familiar, you know. It's Andy I over, and crickets, and pump pull away.
Did you have a favorite?
No, we liked them.
And where did you go to school?
Well, it was 1 mile and a quarter south from where the parsonage was.
And how did you get there?
Well, the first 2 years, the neighbor had 2 boys going to school there, and they drove with a horse and buggy, and they picked me up. And then when the snow came, they had an enclosed sled. It was kind of a little building on the sleigh runners, you know, and that's the way I got back and forth to school.
And what were the schools like?
Well, at that time, they had every 8th grade, you know, all 8 grades. And the building usually was a building with windows on both sides.
And what did the interior look
Well,
like?
the stove was in the middle, and usually the teachers were the janitors. They had to get the coal in, but a lot of times some of the older children would bring in the coal, you know, and the wood.
And how many students were in the school?
Well, 15, 16.
And were there more males or more females? Were there more boys or girls?
Oh, about half and half.
And did your teachers treat students or children from different backgrounds differently?
Yeah, the teachers, yeah. I know some of them were the Scandinavian background that came.
And can you describe what the attendance was like at the school? Was it less during harvest time, or how would you describe the attendance situation at school?
Attending?
Attendance?
Oh, it's pretty good. You went to school, but everybody, if they couldn't walk, they came by horse and buggy.
And during harvest time, would that change?
Well, a lot of them kept their boys home to help on the farm then.
And at times, did you have to stay home to help with anything?
No.
And what is your favorite memory about going to school?
Well, I guess I loved school. School was easy for me.
And why was it easy for you?
Well, I could read and write German before I even went to school, so I had good phonics. And I made the second grade the first year. And then, of course, we wrote exams in January. So I passed my 7th grade in January, and I went in the 8th grade, and then I passed that again in January. So I was only 11 years old when I was all through the 8th grade.
And then what did you do?
Well, my folks felt I was too young to be sent away from home, so they wouldn't, I had to stay home.
For how long?
Well, I think it was 4 years.
Did you take more classes, or did you work at home?
Well, then I worked at home those 4 years, but then a pastor friend in Fargo opened up the Crippled Children's School. It was in Fargo at that time. Now it's in Jamestown, And he wanted these crippled children to get an education, so he had high school for them. And then he offered a Bible course for young ladies and men to enter a Bible course so he could have Christian workers to take care of. He had other institutions like old people's homes were all started. And my folks thought that was the ideal thing for me to take, so I went to Fargo, took the 2 years. I took high school then too. I got 2 years of high school and 2 years of Bible school.
And what was it like moving to Fargo after living in a small town?
Well, we weren't allowed to do much. It was a very Christian, but it was different, at bigger stores and everything. And I worked for boarding rooms, so took care of the crippled children.
And what kind of subjects did you study there? What kind of courses did you take? It's in Fargo?
Well, 2 that gave me credits for high school for 2 years. And I got credits for my 2 years of Bible school too at that time.
And what is your favorite memory about that time?
Well, I was very shy and bashful. Everybody told me, because we weren't allowed to goof off at home. And everybody told me I was a bud opening up. And all the teachers were very nice to me. And Dorthea, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And I really enjoyed my work.
What did you enjoy most about it?
Well, taking care of the crippled children, they were all type. Some were very crippled, and some were more or less, just minor, and a little bit on the retarded side too. And but I don't know, I got into, I like to be humor with, I did a lot of nursing, and I always had a lot of humor with my people.
What do you think you learned the most during your time in Fargo?
Well, there too is patience with handicapped people, and of course my Bible, that you have to live a Christian life. and your Christian life is to serve others.
And when did you go back home?
Well, from there on, I just went home on vacations. I graduated Fargo in '37, and I went home for a month, and then they called. This man had an institution at Arthur, North Dakota. I'm sure you know where that is. And that was a home. He had started that too. They called them feeble-minded at that time. Now they're dementia or Alzheimer's, you know, and epileptic people. And they had about 75 people there. They called me to go to work there. So I went to work there for a couple months, and the lady in charge said, "You've got to go into nursing." So they had and this pastor, they had a home started at Harvey, North Dakota. So I went there, and I worked at the hospital then. And there I really got into nursing, because at that time they even left me on duty alone, you know. So, but there too, there were two nurses that came from another Minnesota, and they said, "Oh, you've got to take that nursing course." Well, and then Harvey was taken over by the Catholics then, so I went home and taught German Vacation Bible School that summer for 8 weeks.
What was that like?
Well, it was easy for me because I had a good German background. And what was interesting, I 4 weeks at SAP, North Dakota, and I stayed with a different family every week. And the other 4 weeks was at south of Dodge, and I stayed with a different family every week too. So
well, is there anything else about school that you would like to talk about?
About this?
About school in general, about grade school or high school?
Mm-hmm. Well, then I went into nurses training at Tyler, Minnesota for 2 years. It was a 2-year course.
And then that is the field you worked in the rest of your life?
Mm.
Is that what you worked in after that?
Well, I went to Waterloo, Iowa then. I was, the Good Samaritan Society called me to come back to work. And I was supervisor of a 25, well, they called it a convalescent home, which is similar to what assisted living is. And I had 20 students to teach practical nursing to.
Now I'd like to go back a little and talk about growing up in Ashley. Did you have chores as a child?
Yeah.
Can you describe them for us?
Well, like I mentioned before, we usually had 3 or 4 cows, and my mother showed me how to milk when I was 6 years old, so I usually help milk 1 or 2 cows.
And what other chores did you
Well,
have?
we fed chickens, geese, and had to get in the coal, take out the ashes.
Where did the coal come from?
I think it came from western North Dakota. Ashley didn't have any coal, so it must have come from western North Dakota.
And what about water?
Well, we had our well. We had to pump our own water and bring it in.
Did that take a long time? Or a lot of work?
Well, usually you pumped it and you had your water, you know.
What about inside chores?
Oh, I had to do my cleaning.
And what did that consist of?
Well, like scrubbing floors and sweeping and washing dishes and all that.
Did you ever help cook?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did your family have a garden?
Yes, my mother always had a big garden.
Did you help with the garden?
Yeah, we had to help hoe, and whenever, well, whatever, you know, can and stuff, we had to help there.
Can you describe the canning process? Can you describe the canning process?
Well, at that time, it was usually can at open kettle style, you know.
What is open kettle style?
Well, you'd cook it in the kettle and put it in a jar and seal it. Nowadays, you know, that they don't feel that's bacteria proof enough. They have to be steamed 3 hours.
And what kind of food did your mother can in order to preserve?
They made pickles, sauerkraut, cabbage, you know, and peas and beans you canned and pickled and all that.
Now, what about laundry? How did your mother do the laundry?
Well, that too. You had to bring in all your water. And usually the older people, they don't do that anymore. You had a boiler. You filled that with hot water. I think it took about 6 or 8 big pails of water. You brought that to a boiling point. And then you take that to the wash machine and pour it in there. And they made their own soap.
How did they do that?
Well, leftovers from when they butchered.
Did your family butcher?
Mm-hmm. Well, we didn't butcher, but we didn't have any pigs. But people would bring us, you know, and the old lard, and we'd buy a piece of meat where, like beef has suet and all that fat from pork, which you didn't render for lard and fat, was used for soap.
How long did it take to make the soap that you used?
Well, you had to buy cans of lye to make it. And you had to heat up the meat, not the meat, but the scraps of old lard and fats and stuff. And of course the lye ate up when you stirred it. It might take an hour or two to stir it to get it. And then you poured it in a crate and cut it in bars.
How long did the entire process take?
Oh, I'd say 4 or 5 hours.
And where did you hang clothes in the winter to dry them?
Oh, inside they had cords and going maybe from wall to wall, and they'd hang the sheets and the clothing on it. But if possible, they were hung out and froze, and brought in. They came in like statues.
And what day was wash day?
Well, beginning of the week, Mondays.
And how would you iron clothes?
Well, they had sad irons at that time. You heated them on the stove, and you had your ironing board, and you'd pick up your iron from the stove and iron till it got cool, and then you took it back and got another one.
Did you ever burn anything?
Oh yeah, get scorched.
Did you burn yourself?
No, it just get brown,
So how did you pick it up from the stove? How did you use something on the handle so you wouldn't burn yourself on the flat iron?
Well, you couldn't burn yourself too easy,
Now, can you tell us where you would go to the bathroom?
Well, that was outdoors.
And where was the outhouse in relation to the house?
Well, usually, I'd say about 15, 20 feet from the house.
Do you remember what it looked like inside? Can you describe it?
Well, it was a building, and then it had a seat in it, and usually 2 holes, and with a sitting position, and that's what you used. And of course, that building was on a dugout.
How deep would they dig those holes? Do you know how deep those holes were?
Oh, 5, 6 feet.
And what would you use for toilet paper?
Catalog paper.
What catalog was it usually?
Sears, Montgomery.
And what about the bathing? How did your family do that? What was the process?
Well, we didn't have bathtubs that time, but you had the wash tubs when you washed clothes. And then usually you'd heat the water on the stove and pour that from a tea kettle into the wash tub.
And was there a specific order of who would go first to last?
The ladies.
So it was you, your mother, your brothers, and then your father?
Yeah. I know some people, they would never change the water, but we did, you know. Each person would have to go into the same water and take a bath, add more water.
Is that what your family would do?
No.
You changed every time?
Yeah.
And that was unusual at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how often were you supposed to brush your teeth?
Well, usually once a week.
And what did you use?
Well, we always used salt and soda.
Dorothy, who usually prepared the meals in your family?
Hmm?
Who prepared the meals in your family?
Well, yeah, I did quite a bit of it. Of course, after you were married, you did them.
Did you also prepare them when you lived with your parents?
Oh, there's times I did. Mm-hmm.
And where was food stored during the summer months?
And, well, a lot of people had ice houses, but we never had one. We had to carry our food into the cellar. They called it a cellar.
Was it a big cellar?
No, it was just a square dugout deal to put jars and potatoes and pumpkin and all that stuff.
And did your brothers help in the kitchen?
Well, my mother wanted to teach them so they would know in case of an emergency, they would know how to go about it.
And how would your family have their meals? Would you always sit at the table together?
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of describe a typical meal?
If we were together?
Yeah, what you would do, where you would sit.
Oh, well, each one had their place, you know, and we always ate together as a family. And of course, come from a pastor's family, we had devotions after breakfast and after supper and prayer before and after meals.
And what types of food did your family usually eat?
Well, in the summertime, it was a lot of vegetables.
And what were some of your favorite meals?
Oh, when spring came, lettuce, you know, fresh out of the garden. And as the summer went, you had peas, beans, new potatoes.
And did your mother make traditional German dishes?
Well, we had more so. We were a little different than what the German Russians were. They made a lot of the dough dishes, which we didn't. We ate more vegetables.
And what about meat? What kind of meat did you eat?
Well, we always had chicken, and in the wintertime, of course, then we'd usually get a piece of pork. My mother would can it, and beef, we'd get a piece of beef, and she'd can that, and so we'd alternate chicken, beef, pork.
And did you have a least favorite meal? What did you like the least for food? What was your least favorite meal?
Least? I don't know. We were made to eat it.
And did your family make ice cream? How would they do that?
Well, we never had ice, so we never could make ice cream. But I know we'd go and visit some of the members, you know, they'd have an ice house. And they'd stir up their cream and sugar and milk and get their ice in, and they'd have these freezers, and you'd churn it or turn it, you know, until it was frozen.
And did your family make sausage from the ham that you would get? Can you describe how you would make the sausage?
Well, it was always ground up, you know, the pieces of meat, and seasoned. We never made so much sausage in casings. My mother usually fried it down in meatballs, and then it was put into crocks and lard poured over it. And that's the way it kept in the summertime. You would go and take out the amount you'd need for the meal.
And it would keep in the lard? And it'd stay fresh?
Yeah.
And what was, considering your father was a minister, what was your family's attitude towards alcohol?
Oh, definitely not.
What about root beer? Root beer?
Root beer? Well, that's something we made.
And how did you make root beer?
Well, I can remember it. You bought a bottle or something, the root beer flavor, and I think then you added water and heated it. And I think you added yeast. And then you put it into bottles or jars. And it, if I remember right, it had to be covered, stored 5 or 6 days before you could store it in the cellar. I think that's the way it was.
Was it good? Now I'd like to talk for a minute about clothing. What types of clothes were common when you were growing up?
Well, there were no jeans. For the girls, it was usually long stockings, long underwear. Every member of the family wore long underwear in the wintertime. And it was cotton material, most of it.
And were your clothes store-bought or handmade?
Well, handmade, most of it.
And if you did have something that was store-bought, where would your parents buy it?
Well, usually the grocery stores had to have a little clothing part in it.
And how often did you get new clothes?
Once a week.
And where did your mother get the material to make the clothes that she did have for you?
Well, there too, it usually Montgomery and Sears Roebuck had catalogs you'd send for your material, or the stores would have yardage.
And did you Did your mom ever have to reuse old clothes to make new ones?
Mm-hmm.
How would she do that?
Well, there was nothing for me to hand down, because I was the only girl. But I know usually I can remember other families, it was kept in good order and then it was handed down to the next child.
And you mentioned your mother sometimes made homemade clothing. Did you learn how to sew?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
I
what-
could. I sewed when I was 10, 11 years old on the machine.
And what, do you know the machine name?
What was that?
Well, how often did you get new shoes?
Oh, when they were worn out.
And how many pairs did you have as a child?
Maybe one or two. One for every day and a pair for Sundays, maybe.
And where would you go to buy your shoes?
Well, I remember even the stores had that. They had everything,
Now, when did your family get electricity?
Well, we only got it after we were married, I think 5 or 6 years.
How did that change your life?
Well, it was quite a bit different.
Can you tell us how?
Well, you didn't have to put up with coal and ashes. And you had a furnace, and you didn't need a stove in the main part of the house,
And what about with laundry? How did it change, say, household
Well,
things?
there too, it was less work. I think a cleaner air atmosphere because you didn't have all the dust and ashes.
And when did your family get its first car or truck?
Well, my folks got their first car when we moved from Montana to Ashley. One of the Ford Tourings.
And what about when your family got a telephone?
Well, I remember the parsonage had a telephone when we got there. So,
What kind of telephone was it?
one that hangs on the wall, with a cabinet, and had that speaker in the middle and front, And you'd ring if you wanted to call your neighbors, you had maybe too long and too short. And another neighbor had a short and a long and a short.
And when did it change to numbers?
I think, well, it was when we were on the farm. Must have been in the 40s.
Well, how important was the radio in your family?
Well, in my family, we never had a radio when I was home.
for a minute about religion, since it was a major part of your childhood. How often did your family attend church since your father was a minister?
Every Sunday, every holiday. And you had a lot more holidays, church holidays, than you do now.
And what denomination were you raised? What denomination?
It was the Lutheran.
And what was the name of the church your family attended?
Well, my father always had more than one church. At Ashley, he had 5 churches he had to preach. And the churches' names were the Zion, Peace, Our Saviors, and all them names. Each church had their own name.
And were there any seating arrangements in the church? Were there seating arrangements in the church?
Well, yeah. They usually had either chairs, all chairs, or some had pews, but the men would sit on one side and the ladies on one other side.
And when did that change?
In the 40s, in the later 30s.
And what were some of the religious activities that you participated in?
Well, activities?
Like Bible school
Yeah.
when you were a child or anything?
Yeah. My father always had 6 weeks of confirmation school. So every child had to go 6 weeks. And then in the summer he had vacation Bible school. And he'd have that 4 weeks.
Did you go to those every year?
Yeah, I went to his confirmation school when I was 7 years old.
What was confirmation school like?
Well, my father made all the, if they were capable and able, learning all the commandments, the Lord's Prayer, and the creeds, and the sacrament of baptism, and the sacrament of the altar. That was in our catechism. And then there were 365 Bible verses in the catechism. If they were able to memorize them, he had them memorize them too. And then hymns and psalms, had to memorize several of them. Mm-hmm.
And did you memorize all of them?
Yeah, I knew them all by 10 years of age.
And when were you confirmed? When were you confirmed?
Well, he confirmed me early too. Most of them were 12, 13, or 14 years old, and I was 11 years old when he confirmed me.
And was there a celebration after that?
Oh yeah, usually you had friends and neighbors come for dinner.
And what, were you able to question religious teachings when you were growing up?
Yeah, you wonder, why certain things were done and why that,
And what did your parents restrict because of religion?
Well, there too, we weren't allowed to go to dances or anything like that.
And was the Sunday holiday dinner different than other meals during the
Yeah,
week?
it was special, you know. You'd
Well,
usually make pie or cake.
and what was the typical meal for a church celebration?
Well, these were all the Germans from Russia, you know, when I grew up. So they had their typical meals, like their sauerkraut and Knäpfle and that one dish they made a lot was they called it Greer or Stirum, and they ate lettuce and cream on it. We made that too, but we always ate sauce on it. Pears and peaches and plum sauce, where they ate their lettuce and cream on it.
And was the German language used for church services? Was the German language used for the church services?
Oh yes, all German until way into the 30s.
And how did your family respond towards death? Can you describe a typical funeral? Can you describe what a typical funeral was like?
Funeral? That too. Neighbors and friends would come over, you know, before the day of the funeral, and then they would be taken to church. And most of the time, I remember they were on Sundays, you know, afternoons. And then everybody would gather, and then after the cemetery, they'd go to the family's house and have a dinner. Yes.
And how did your family view other faiths?
Of what?
How did your family view other faiths?
Treat other faith. Well, we always respected them.
Were you able to associate with them?
Well, those years usually you had, like at Ashley, there was no other, much of any other faith, you know. I think there was a congregational church east, but very little did we get together. But it was after you got older, and once I moved or got to working, I went to different churches.
I'd like to talk a minute about two holidays. What was your favorite holiday?
Well, usually Christmas.
Can you describe how Christmas was celebrated in your family's home?
Well, at that time, they always had services on the 24th, Christmas, and my dad always had Christmas programs in all the churches with the youth. So each one had to memorize a piece and say it, and they'd sing their German songs, you know, and then after that, the children all would get a bag with an orange and an apple and nuts and peanuts, candy.
And did you get any gifts?
Yeah, we usually, you know, you got one gift.
Are there any that stand out?
Well, I got a big doll one Christmas. And of course, like at Christmas time, we get all this. The pastor and his family always got that extra bag. So we got a lot of candy and nuts and oranges.
And what kind of food would your mother make? What kind of food did your mother make during Christmas?
Well, it usually would be a goose or a duck, and then the trimmings.
Now, the next holiday I'd like to talk about is Easter. Mm-hmm. How did your family celebrate Easter?
Well, we dyed a few eggs.
And what else did you do?
Well, that was about it, you know.
What about celebrating the 4th of July?
Well, that's something my parents never did.
And did they celebrate birthdays?
A little.
How would they do that?
Maybe you'd get a birthday cake.
No gifts?
No, not that I can remember.
And did your family participate in sausage parties or butchering parties or anything like that?
Butchering?
Butchering parties where the neighbors would get together?
No, we never did.
Did they celebrate any other holidays?
Not really.
I'd like to talk about youth activities and dating. What types of things did you do during your teenage years for fun?
Well, I think my life was a little different, as I wasn't allowed to go out. Not until I left, you know, to extend my vacation.
And did you go to the movies when you did leave home? Did you ever go to the movies? What about dating? How old were you when you dated?
Well, I was 19 years old before I had my first date.
And can you describe a typical date? Can you describe a typical date? What you would do on a date?
Super date?
What you would do on a date?
Well, at that time we'd go to a movie.
And did you ever attend parties? What about dancing? Dancing?
No.
I'd like to talk for a second about weddings. How did you meet your spouse?
Well, I came home on vacation, and my father had a service at the church they went to, you know, and it was custom then that after church, you know, they'd ask the pastor and family for the dinner. Well, it was his relatives that had asked us for dinner. And, well, at that time, the older people would always make the young people get together. So they made us drive down to the river, and but I never thought anything of it, you know. And until Christmas, he wrote a card to me, and sent me a little bottle of perfume.
Do you remember the perfume?
Yeah.
What was it?
What was it? Oh.
So would you say this was an arranged situation? How you met? Would you say they wanted you and your husband to get together, so they arranged it?
Well, not really, you know. But I know a lot of that went on. The parents would arrange someone's, maybe a neighbor boy or a girl, to get together.
And what was your parents' attitude towards him? Did they like him? Did your parents like him?
Well, they thought he was okay.
And when and where did you get married?
We got married in 43.
Where at?
At Halliday. And my father married us.
Can you describe the wedding day?
It rained. Just poured. And the roads were something else. We had to host families overnight because they couldn't go home on account of the bad roads.
Did your dress turn out okay? Was your dress okay?
Well, it got a few mud stains.
And did you buy your dress or was it homemade?
Well, I bought it.
Do you remember how much it cost?
$25.
And where did you buy it at?
In Fargo.
And what was the reception like?
Well, we only had the attendants, his family. None of my relatives could come. They all lived out of state. And then another couple that were close friends.
And what kind of food was served at the reception?
Well, it was the ordinary.
Do you remember what it was?
No, it was baked rice and potatoes and I don't remember the meat, vegetable.
So was there anything unusual about your courtship?
Well, we only dated when I was on vacation because I worked in Waterloo, Iowa. So we were corresponding for 4 years.
So was he a good letter writer? Did he write letters well?
Yeah. Oh.
And how old were you when you got married?
Almost 25.
And did you have a honeymoon?
Yeah.
Where did you go?
Minneapolis.
What did you do there? Did you just, how
Well,
long did you stay?
It was in the wartime and he wanted to buy a car. We didn't have a car. So we went with the train from Halliday to Minneapolis, and I had a friend there. And I knew she was very able to show us around and take us. So we bought our first car there,
What was it?
a Studebaker.
Well, is there anything else about the wedding or your courtship that you would like to add?
Well, I know there too, I wanted flowers, but it was a cold spring, and I thought, and of course there were no flower shops in those little towns. I thought if the lilacs bloom, I'll have lilacs. They weren't even in bloom.
So what did you didn't have any flowers then?
Well, I carried a Bible, and I had streamers, and I think we did get some fresh flowers from Dickinson at the time.
I'm going to talk for a second about healthcare. Healthcare. What kind of healthcare was available when you were young?
Well, there too, you went to the doctors usually came out to your home, if you needed them, which is something they don't do now. So, but we never had much of any health care problems.
So there were no serious illnesses or injuries? There were no serious illnesses or injuries?
No. Mm-mm.
Did your mother ever have to make home remedies?
There wasn't that much of a remedy,
And where was the closest doctor's office?
10 miles.
And Dorothy, what was it like for you growing up on the plains?
On the plains? Well, in a way, I think it was kind of lonesome, and there wasn't much you could do to change it. You had to live it.
And was there anything that you found beautiful about it? Was there anything that you found beautiful about the plains?
Well, there was something, I think, kind of relaxing,
And what about unpleasant? What did you find unpleasant about it?
Well, I don't know, you just made the best of it.
And what were the winters like when you were a child?
Well, they were similar to what we had this winter, a lot of it, a lot of snow, a lot of cold.
And what about the spring? What was a typical spring like?
Well, they too, some springs came early and some came later,
And what about a typical summer?
Well, some were hot.
Was it always that way?
More or less. A couple months were pretty hot.
What about the fall?
Well, that was pretty nice, you know.
And what was your favorite season?
I think spring.
And what would you say was your most stressful childhood experience?
Stressful.
The most stressful childhood experience.
I can't really recall a stressful day, you know.
What about your happiest childhood memory?
Oh, when we could get together with people.
What would you do on those days?
Oh, visit and more or less just with children, we'd play games and things.
And what is the most adventurous thing you did in your childhood?
I don't know.
Well, is there anything else about your childhood memories that you would like to add?
Not that I can think of right now.
And in conclusion, why do you think it's important to tell your life story? Why do you think it's important to tell your life story?
Well, everybody's told me I should write my life story. And I have a niece, after she heard some of the experiences I had and so forth, she got me a book. This is a lot similar to this that I am filling out. And then I thought I'll write my own life story. So I started a journal and writing that too.
And what do you hope your children and grandchildren learn from this? What do you hope your grandchildren and children learn from this?
Well, so they kind of know what my life was like, and that I want them to live a good life too, you know.
Well, are there any other thoughts or observations that you would like to add?
No, that I can think of.